Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to build a clean and responsive quiz app using React, Tailwind CSS, and a little bit of TypeScript for static typing. This is a perfect beginner-friendly project and we are going to walk through everything step by step. From setting up the UI, showing one question at a time, tracking the user score, and even adding smooth animations with framer motion. By the end of this tutorial, you have a fully functional quiz app that looks great and works seamlessly across devices. So if you are learning React or just looking for a fun mini project, you are in the right place. In this application, questions are going to be coming in randomly, which every time you refresh the web page, you are going to notice that the questions are going to be random. And for each quiz session, a user can answer 5 questions. A user cannot go to the next question without actually picking an answer to the current question. So for me to go to the next question, I have to pick an answer to this question. So what is the first letter of the alphabet? I'm going to pick A. Then I'm going to click on next question. And you can see that little smooth animation right there. We are going to do that using framer motion. What is the opposite of cold? It's hot. We are going to go to the next question. What do you use to brush your teeth? I'm going to pick the wrong question on purpose. I'm going to say spoon. Then I'll go to the next question. What do bees make? Honey. Then I'll go to the next questions. Then how many hours are there in a day? I'm going to pick 12. I'm going to fill that on purpose. After that, we're going to see our score. 3 out of 5. We got 3 questions right out of 5 questions. And we can also restart the quiz. And then we're going to see another random 5 questions. If you are excited about this tutorial, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on more awesome tutorials like this. So I already have React and Tailwind CSS set up. So we're just going to dive into creating this quiz application. So first of all, I'm going to run this application, npm run dev. And this application is running at localhost port 5173, so I'm just going to follow that. And you can see our application right here, React Quiz App. And this quiz application is going to have 2 UI that is going to be shown to the user. First of all, we're going to have the UI that's going to be shown to the user when the user is actually going through the quiz. And then we're going to have the completed screen that's going to be shown to the user when the user completes the screen. So first of all, I'm going to create a component folder right here. In my SRC folder, I'm going to create a component folder. I want to call this folder component. And inside this component folder, I'm going to create a component called quiz.csx rfc. Inside this component, I'm going to create a state. I want to call this state const show results. Then set show results equals to use states. And by default, this show result is going to be false. And down here, I can see if show result is true, if show result, then I want to return a h1 tag that's going to say quiz completed. Else, I'll just return down a quiz ongoing. In my app.css, so I just get rid of this h1 text right here. Get rid of this div right here. Now just import that quiz component. Returning back to the web page, you can see right now we have this text right here, quiz ongoing. Now if I set this show results to true, which means the quiz has been completed, it's going to render to the UI quiz completed. And that's how our application is going to work. When we are actually answering questions, it's going to be in the state of quiz ongoing. And when we've completed the quiz, we're going to see this quiz completed component that's going to show us our final results. Now, the first part of this tutorial, I'm going to work on creating the UI of this application using Tailwind CSS. While the second part, we're going to work on the logic of this quiz application. Now, if you are more interested in the logic end of this application, I'm going to leave timestamps in the description below. So I want to get rid of this div. I'm going to add div. And this div is going to have a class name of hScreen and a bg of hash 001e4d, a display of flex, justify of center, items of center, and a padding of 4. I'm going to save that. When we return back to our web page, you can see we have this HScreen component right here in the web page. Now I want to position that quiz component at the middle of this web page. So let's create a div for that. So I want to create another div. I want to give this one a class name of bgwhite, then maximum width of LG, which means it's going to have a maximum width of 512 pixels, a padding of 6, a width of full, a shadow of LG, and a rounded of LG. Save that. Now in here, I'm going to pass in a h1 tag. This h1 tag is simply going to say simple quiz. Then you can see right now we have that component right here at the center of the web page with this h1 tag of simple quiz. And let's style up this h1 tag. I'm going to give it a class name of text, 2XL, a font of semi-bold, and a text color of this color right here we use for our background. Paste that in here. And you can see we have this h1 text right here, simple quiz. I think I want to make this one bold. Instead of semi-bold, I'll just make use of bold. Instead of semi-bold, I'll just make use of bold. Save that. Yeah, bold is better. So after my h1 tag, I'll create a h2 tag. And this h2 tag is going to be actually be the question. So I'm going to see what is the capital of France. I'll style this up. First of all, I'm going to give this a class of text, XL, font, semi-bold. And yeah, that's really good. Now, but these two texts are too close to each other, so I'll give this h2 tag a margin bottom. I'll use 6. Yeah, that's way better. After this h2 tag, I'm going to create a div that's going to house our options. I'm going to give this div a class name of grid, a gap of 6, and a margin bottom of 6. Right. So inside this div, we're going to add our option button. So the first button is going to be Berlin. The second button is going to be Paris. The third button is going to be Lagos. And the last button is going to be Madrid. And you can see we have our option buttons right here. Now let's style them up. So I'm going to style up this first option first, and I'll copy these styles and paste on the other button. So I'm going to give it a class name of text, left, a background of BG, grade 200, padding horizontal of 4, and padding vertical of 3, a rounded of LG, a cursor of pointer, a text of XL, and on hover, I want it to have a background of BG blue 200. I'll save that. And you can see we have our first option right here, completely styled up. I'm going to copy that class and paste on the other options. So I'll just copy this class here. I'll copy this class. Copy it and I'll paste on the other buttons. Paste. And you can see we have all the other options right here. So I'm going to give this a margin top, or give this question a margin bottom. I need a margin between these options and this question tag right here. So up here, I'm going to give this h2 tag a margin bottom of 4. I'll just zoom that out. Yeah, this is way better. Next, I'm going to create our next button and our progress button. So down here, I'm going to create another div. Inside this div, I'm going to pass in a button that's just going to say next, which is going to be taking us to the next question. And after that button, I'm going to create another div, and this div is going to house our progress, which is going to be question 1 of 5. I'm just going to hard code this first, then when we start working on the logic, I'm going to make it dynamic. And you can see them right here. Now let's start this up. So first of all, I'm going to give the container that houses both of them a class name of flex, then flex of column, then item center, then justify center. I obviously want everything at the center, then a gap of 3. Yeah, perfect. This is how I want it. Now I'm going to style up this next button. So first of all, I'm going to give this button a class name of BG. It's going to be this color right here, this hair color right here. I'm going to copy that and paste that right here. Then a text of white, a white color, padding horizontal of 8 and padding vertical of 2. Then a text of XL, a cursor of pointer, and a rounded of SM, small border radius. Save that. And you can see we have our next button completely styled up. Now let's style up this progress, this question 1 of 5. I'm going to give this a test gray of 600, then text XM, then lastly text center. Perfect. I'm just going to increase the gap between them. So instead of using gap 3, I'm going to use gap 6. Yeah, this is way better. Now we are done with styling the component that is going to be shown to the user when the quiz is ongoing. Now let's style up the component that is going to be shown to the user when the quiz has been completed to see our final score. So up here in that state we created, I'm just going to say set this to true so that we can return this result component. So I'm going to set this to true first. I'm just going to close up this sidebar right here, close this terminal up so that we can see this code better. Then return back to the web page. You can see that we have our quiz completed UI being rendered to the UI. Now let's style this up. So first of all, I'm just going to copy these first 2 div tags because they are basically going to be the same thing. Then I'll just paste that right here. Then I'll create a closing div tag and another closing div tag. Then format the document. And you can see it right here. Now I'll show result components. So next, I'm going to copy this H1 tag right here because we are basically going to do the same thing here. So I'll copy this H1 tag. I'll just paste that right here. Now instead of simple quiz, it's going to say quiz completed. All right, cool. I just noticed I didn't spell this correctly. TXT instead of TXT. Let me just go back and correct that. Yeah, it's TXT. Text of that color. And underneath this H1 tag, I'm going to have a P tag. And this P tag is going to be your score. You're going to take a strong. It's going to be, you got, let me say 2 out of 5. Style this up. I'll say class name of text LG. Margin bottom of 6. Yeah, you score 2 out of 5. Now I want this quiz completed to be at the center. So I'll just say I want this to have a text of center. Same thing with this score. I want the score to be at the center. So I'll say text of center. Save that. Yeah, I like it this way. I want it to be at the center. Now we have to add a button to actually restart the quiz. Let's do that. So after this pizza, I'm going to add a button. And this button is just simply going to say restart quiz. So we have a class name of BG green 600, a padding horizontal of 4, a padding vertical of 2, a text of white, a cursor of pointer, and on hover we want to have a BG green 700. All right, that's really cool. So I'm going to give it a rounded of LG. Let me just say rounded, or let me use MD. Yeah, that's really good. Now I want this to be at the center, so I'm going to add a test center to it. Now instead of adding test center to this H1, this div, and this button, I just add test center to the container that has both of them. That is this div right here. Then it's going to position everything at the center. Save that. Yeah, everything's at the center. And our UI is completely done. Let's start working on the logic. So I'm going to set it back to false so that we can see our quiz. I'm going to set that back to false. Yeah. Now to build this application, we actually need questions. So in my SRC folder, I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call this folder data. Then inside this folder, I'm going to create a TypeScript file called questions.txt. Now I'm making use of TS because I'm not going to be returning any JSX. Then I just paste some questions in here. Now we have about 20 questions right here. Now we have to import these questions in our quiz component. So let's do that. So inside our quiz component, I'm going to say import questions from data questions. Now remember, in our quiz, we are not going to be making use of all the questions at once. We are randomly going to be picking 5 questions and show that 5 questions to the user. So we have to create a state for that 5 questions. But first, we have to create the function that's actually going to shuffle that questions and pick 5 random questions. So up here, I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call this function shuffle and pick 5. Now this function right here is basically going to do what it's named to do. It's going to shuffle our questions array and it's going to pick 5 randomly. So anything I call this function is going to take an array, and the array is going to be of type of questions. Now when I hover over this question, you're going to see the data type right here. Each question is going to be a string. It's going to have options. There's going to be a data type. There's going to be an array of string. It's going to have an answer that's going to be a string, and this is actually easier than creating an interface. Now, since this is going to contain all the questions that we are getting from our questions.ts, I'm going to say import questions as all questions. So we understand that this is basically all the questions we are getting from our question.ts file right here, this file right here. So instead of type of question, I'm going to say type of all questions. I'm just going to create a quick function to actually shuffle our array randomly. So const shuffled is equals to, I'm going to create a copy of that array. So I'm going to spread it open. Then dot sort. It's going to take a callback function. Then I'm going to say 0.5 minus math.random. Now, what this line of code is going to do is that, we have 20 questions coming from our question.ts, and we want to actually sort them out randomly. This right here is going to make a copy of that questions coming from our question.ts. That's this 20 question we're importing right here. After making that copy, it's going to sort it randomly using this sort method I wrote right here. And this is a very quick way to sort out items of an array randomly. Now, after we've sorted this array randomly, we just want to return 5. Because right now, this shuffle is still going to return 20 questions. So we want to just return 5. So how do we do that? So down here, I'm going to say this function is going to return shuffled.slice. You want to start at index 0 to index 5. Now, this line of code right here, we're going to return the first 5 after we've sorted our array randomly. So down here, I'm going to create a question for our code. I'm going to say const quiz questions, then set quiz questions is equals to use states. Now, instead of setting our quiz question states to these all questions right here, we're going to set it to the 5 questions that this function is going to return. So inside this state, I'm going to run an arrow function. I'm going to call this shuffle and pick function. Then we're going to pass in the all questions in there. Now, what this is going to do is that it's going to take these all questions here, then it's going to run this function and return just 5, and it's going to set that 5 to our state right here, which means our quiz question is going to be equals to the 5 random questions we are getting from this function up here. Let me close up this. Then I'm going to save that. And to display a question to a user, we are going to be using the index number of that question, which means we're going to have a state that if that state corresponds to the index number of the question is going to be shown to the user. So then I'm going to create another state. I'm going to call this state current question index, then set current question index, which is going to be equals to use state hook. Now by default, this index is going to be 0. Then underneath this state, I'm going to create our current question, which is going to be equals to our quiz questions, then our current question index. Now what this is going to do is that we have 5 quiz questions right here, because from this state right here we are shuffling and picking just 5 quiz questions, which means this quiz question is going to have 5 questions in it. Now that 5 questions are an array, which means they have index number of 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now to demonstrate this, I'm going to get rid of this what is the capital of France, and I'm going to pass in a question right here. So I'm going to say current question dot question. All right, cool. I'm going to save that. And when I come back to the web page, you can see we have right here what is h2 commonly known as, and this is the question at the index of 0. So if I change this to index of 1 and save that, you're going to notice that the question is going to change to the next question: what do you use to brush your teeth? Now that we have our questions displayed, now let's work on outputting our options. So down here, I'm going to get rid of all these buttons. I just need one button. Then up here, I'm going to say the current question dot I need the options of the question, then map. Then it's going to take an option. I'm going to call this option, then the index number of the question. Then I'm just going to return this button right here. Anytime I return this, I just want to output the option. Save that. Now when we return back to the web page, you can see right now how many legs does a spider have. Then when we refresh, we're going to see another question: what do you use to write on a blackboard? Then when we refresh again, we're going to see another question: what do you use to brush your teeth? Now these questions are coming in randomly. Now what we are going to work on next is that when we click on an option, I want that option to be selected and I want our score to be updated. So we're going to create a state for that. So up here, I'm going to create another state. I want to call this state const score, then set score, and it's equals to use state. By default, our score is going to be 0. Then down here, you can create another state called selected answer, then set selected answer, which is equals to use state. And by default, our selected answer is going to be null. Now this is a string that can be null, so we have to tell TypeScript that. So I'm going to say this is either going to be a string or is going to be null. Now when someone clicks on an option, I want to handle that event. So in this button right here, I'm going to add an event listener. Now on click of this button, I want to run an arrow function that's going to fire a function called handle answer, which is going to take that option as an argument. That is this option right here, the option we selected. Then up here, I'm going to create a function for that. I'm going to say const handle answer is equals to an arrow function. Then that parameter I'll pass, I'm going to call that selected option, as the option the user selected, and it's going to be of type string. Then I'll set my selected answer to selected option. That's this selected answer state I created. I'm going to set it to the option the user actually selected. Now after that, I'm going to actually check if the user actually selected the right option. If he selected the right answer, then we want to update the score and increase the user's score. Now if the user selected the wrong answer, we just want to return. We don't want to do anything. We want to leave the score at its current state. Now I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call this variable is correct is equals to selected option if it's equivalent to the current question dot the answer. All right, cool. Now if is correct is true, then I want to set score. I'm going to get the previous score. Then I'm going to say previous score plus 1 point. Let me explain what this function is doing now. This function, first of all, is going to set our selected answer state to the option the user selected. So we now know the answer the user actually selected. Then next, we are going to create a variable. Now this variable is going to be a boolean. It's going to be either true or false. And you can see right here, the variable is actually a boolean data type. It's going to be either true or false. Now, the variable is going to be true when the selected option is equal to this current question.answer, and it's going to be false when it does not equals this. Now, this selected option, I'm going to check if it's equals to the answer of the question we are actually trying to answer. Now, if it's equal to this answer, the option I selected is equal to this answer, then this is correct. It's going to be true. Now, if the is correct is true, then I'm going to update the score. Now, if initially I've answered 0 questions correctly, it's going to be 0 plus 1, which means I have answered 1 question correctly. But if the option is selected is not true, now this is going to return a false. Now, when this is false, this block of code is not going to run. You're just going to jump this block of code. Now, what I want to do next is that I want to actually indicate the option the user selected. Now, when the user actually selected an option, I want to actually give that particular option a background color that to indicate that the user has selected that particular option. So down here, I'm going to create a variable. So this variable is going to be const is selected is equals to selected answer if it's equivalent to the option right now. Now, if this is equivalent to the option, this is going to return true. But if it's not equal to the option, it's going to return false. So down here, I'm going to add a dynamic style. I'm going to cut this off. Then I'm going to say $ if is selected. If this particular option is selected, then I want to give this a style of BG blue. Not blue, use green 300. S, I want it to be an empty string. Now, when we return back to our application and click on an option, you're going to notice that that option is going to have a green background color, which means we have selected an answer. But the problem is that when we click on red, it's going to show that we've selected the red. We want the user to be able to select one answer at a time. Now, when the user has selected an answer, the score is going to be updated. The user can no longer select any answer. The user has to go to the next question. So what we could do is add a disabled property to this button. So I'm going to say disabled. Now I can pass in true or false, but I'm going to pass this in selected answer. Now, what this is going to do is that if this selected answer is null, because this selected answer is either going to be null or a string. So if this selected answer is null, it's going to return false, which means a user has not selected, which means the button is not disabled. Now, if this selected answer is actually a string, which means the user has selected an answer, what's going to happen is that this string right here is going to be converted to true, which is going to be a boolean by these 2 exclamation mark right here, which means if a user did not select anything, it's going to be false, which means the user can click on a button. But when a user clicks on an answer, the user can no longer click on any other answer because the button is going to be disabled. Now let's test this out. So I'm going to return back. I'm going to refresh this web page. Then I'm going to click on Venus. And when I click on Venus, you're going to notice that I cannot click on any other option anymore because I already clicked on my answer, which is Venus. Now, next, what we want to work on is that I want to be able to click on next. When we click on next, it's going to take us to the next question, and we're going to see question 2 of 5. When we click on next again, it's going to take us to the next question. Then we're going to see question 3 of 5. Let's work on that. So first off, I have to create a function to handle our next. So up here, I'm going to create a function. Say const handle next is equals to an arrow function. So first of all, we have to get our next index. So I'm going to say const next index is equals to current question index plus 1. Now, which means if we are at the first question is going to have an index of 0 because computer starts counting from 0. So the first question is going to be at index of 0. So which means our next question is going to be at an index of 1, which means 0 plus 1 is going to give us our next question, which is going to be the next index. And at the same time, we don't want to go to the next question when the user is at the 5th question because we want users to be able to answer only 5 questions. So we have to check if the next index is less than quiz questions dot length. Remember that the number of questions we're going to have in our quiz questions is going to be always 5. Which means if this next index is equal to quiz questions.length, which means we are at the final questions. At that point, we don't want to go to the next question anymore. At that point, we don't even want to show the next button. So if the user is not at the last question, so I want to set current question index to the next index, that's show the next question, and also set our selected answer back to null. And this is going to reset our selected answer for the next question. Now, if this next index is not less than quiz questions, which means we are at the final question, then we just want to set our show result, that's our result screen, to true. I'll save that. Now that we have created this function, all that is left to do is hook up this function to that next button. So I'm going to copy the name of the function. I'm going to scroll down to the next button right here. Then click on this button. I want to run a function called handle next. When I return back to the web page, I notice when I click on next, it's going to take us to the next question. Now this one, I want to make this dynamic. So when we click on next, it's going to show question 2 or 5. When we click on next again, it's going to show question 3 or 5. Now by default, this state is going to be set to 0, not 1, 0. It's going to be set to 0, which means it's going to pick the first question in our index. So I'm going to scroll down there. I'm going to pass in that. Instead of displaying 1 here, I'm going to say current question index, and also instead of displaying 5 here, I'm going to display the length of the total questions. What's the length of the total questions? Our quiz questions dot length. Save that. Return back to the web page. I'm going to notice that we now have question 0 or 5, question 1 or 5. It's not starting from 1, and that's because, like I said, computer starts their questions from 0, so it's going to start at an index of 0, and by default our question index is actually 0 because we want to actually pick the first item in the array, which is the item at the index of 0. So what we are going to do is that down here we're going to say current question index plus 1. Then save that. When we return back to the web page, we're going to say question 1 of 5, question 2 of 5, question 3 of 5, question 4 of 5, question 5 of 5. Then when we click on this, it's going to show us our quiz completed. But we have a problem. When we don't select any option, we can click on this next button. We don't want that. We want to be able to click on this next button when we selected an option. So to do that, I'm going to go to our handle next. I'm going to check if a user selected an answer. So yeah, I'm just going to check right here. I'm saying if selected answer. If the user selected an answer, then we are going to run this code. But if the user does not select an answer, if not selected an answer, or I can check if it's null, but this will also work. If no selected answer, I just want to return right here. Now this place is going to stop executing the code. Now when I return back to the web page, when I don't select an answer, when I click on next, it's not going to work until I select an answer. Then I can click on next. It's going to take me to the next question. If I don't select an answer, it's not going to go to the next question. So what color is the sky on the clear day? It's blue. So I'm going to click on next question. Then what do you use to write on the blackboard? I'm going to say pen, any answer, click on next. Sunday, any answer, click on next. Then 4, click on next. Then you can see quiz completed. Right now, you can see that the score we are seeing right here, your score 2 out of 5, is the score we had coded right here, 2 out of 5. So we want to actually pass in this score dynamically. So instead of hard coding 2, I'm going to pass in the score right here. I'm going to save that. Then I'm going to take the quiz again. I'm just going to refresh the web page. I'm going to say tea. What do cows drink? Tea. Which comes after Saturday? Then next question, how many fingers do humans usually have? Then which animal says quack? I think it's dog. Then which letter is the first letter? A. Then you can see we have 4 out of 5. We failed 1 question. Now when we click on this button, I want to restart the quiz. So I'm going to work on that. So to do that, I want to create a function. So now I'm going to create another function called restart quiz is equals to an arrow function. First of all, we're going to set our score back to 0. Set your score back to 0. set the current question index to 0. Current question index back to index of 0. Then set our show results. We don't want to show our results screen. Set show results to false. Go back to the ongoing quiz component. Then last, we want to reshuffle our quiz question. That's get new questions. So I'm going to say set quiz questions. I'm going to pass in that shuffle and pick 5. Then I'm going to pass in the all questions in there. So anytime I click on restart quiz, it's going to reshuffle our 20 questions and pick 5 randomly. Then lastly, and most importantly, I'm going to set the selected answer back to null. All right, cool. Save that. Now I'm going to refresh the web page. Then click on Wolf. Just click on a bunch of random stuff. Jam. Just click on bottom stuff. Then you can restart the quiz. You can go on blue with new questions, new random questions. 48. Yeah, you see everything is working fine. Now with that, we are basically done with the logic of our quiz application. Now all that's left to do is actually add a little cool animation using Framer motion. So I'm going to head back. I'm going to create a new terminal up here. I'm going to create a new terminal. I'll say cd React quiz app. I want to install Framer motion, so I'm going to say npm install Framer motion. I'll click on enter, and that's going to install Framer motion for us in our application. So I'm going to close up this terminal now. I'm going to need two things from Framer motion. I'm going to import, first of all, motion and animate presence from Framer motion. Now next, I'm going to wrap up everything in our quiz that I want to animate into the screen. So I'll scroll down right here. I want it to start after this history tag, the question. I'll wrap this up. Then I'll just cut these two. Then I'm going to say animate presence. And after that, I'm going to say motion.div. Then I'm going to paste those items in here. Now I just forgot something very important. I didn't make use of this index. Now when we map through our question option, we didn't pass in a key. Now a key is very important in React. That's why React keeps track of the list of items. So the key is going to be index. And that's a very, very silly mistake. So up here, I'm going to say the mode is going to be wait. We have to pass in our animation properties. So first of all, we have to pass in a key. When our current question index changes, that's going to be my key. Then the initial position is going to be opacity of 0. Then it's going to be Y of 30. That's 30 pixels from its original position. Then we want it to animate to an opacity of 1. Then the Y is going to be its original position, the position we want it to animate to. Then for the exit, we want it to have an opacity of 0. Go back to an opacity of 0. Then a Y of -30. Then a transition of duration 0.6. Now I'm going to save that. Now when we return back to our application, I'm going to select an option going and click on next question. It's going to animate in. How many legs does a spider have? I don't really know. It's going to animate the next question in. Then what do bees make? Honey. When we go to the honey, it's going to go to the next questions. Then what do you use to brush your toothbrush? I'm going to move on to the next question. Then what is 2 + 2? 4. Then we're going to move on to the next question. You're going to say your score 4 out of 5. Now with that, we are basically done with this application. Now if you enjoyed this tutorial, smash on the like button and leave a random comment below. It's going to help the YouTube algorithm to push this content to more people who are going to find it helpful. And if you enjoy React tutorials like this, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next tutorial. I'll see you in the next video.